jump right in. Actually, I should probably change the stream really quickly to just chatting, because we're going to be chatting a little bit, just you and I chatting, about what's going on with Bluesky. That's a lie. I saw you playing the Mega Bonk. We will bonk megally. But first, we got to talk about what's going on with the bluest of skies first. I wanna give a little update, and we might get some more info live midstream, so just keep that in mind as well, because some folks I know are actually meeting with Bluesky in present day. Like, it's actually basically happening. It's either wrapping up or is happening like as I stream. So keep in mind that we probably might have more to even talk about with this issue as the stream goes on. But yeah, I want to talk about this. I want to talk about Bluesky. I want to talk about where Bluesky is at. She was asleep at the time. Those backdoor meetings. Foo. Did I accidentally leave Megabonk up? Oops. Anyway, okay. Bluesky. I want to talk to you all about Bluesky and what's going on with Bluesky at the moment, because she's not looking great. And I want to talk a little bit about my own relationship with Bluesky and where things are going to go. So, I'm going to try to do this in chronological order. So, earlier in the month, I forget the specific date, but earlier in the month, it was sometime, it was about, like, I would say, probably about, I would say probably about over a week ago now. There was an update to Bluesky's community guidelines, and this update was set to go into effect for October 15th, which is a date that's going to come up again. So October 15th, update to Bluesky community guidelines will officially go in effect. There have been some updates and changes. Bluesky was taking some feedback about an initial round of community guidelines updates that went into that were implemented, that were introduced in August. And this infographic explains pretty well the most particularly concerning parts of the changes to the Bluesky community guidelines. Before, ban on encouraging self-harm or suicide, as well as depictions of excessive violence, gore, torture, dismemberment, or non-consensual sexual activity. Now, we do not allow sexual content involving non-consensual activity, including synthetic, simulated, illustrated, or animated versions. Do not create, share, or promote sexual content involving realistic risk of death or serious injury. Do not share content, methods, instructions, or promotion of self-harm, suicide, eating disorders, and extreme dieting practices. Do not share methods, instructions, depictions, or promotion of dangerous stunts or abuse of dangerous controlled substances. And then we have protected expression, support recovery, mental health, personal recovery experiences, or survivor stories shared to promote healing and community support rather than encouraging harmful behavior, and sharing verified mental health okay. So there's like over here. Shared remote healing and community support rather than encouraging harmful behavior. I'm not going to talk as much about the protective expression stuff over here. I'm a bit confused. Is this part of the new guidelines? I forget. It hasn't been an area of focus for me. I want to focus more on the before now over here with the changes to the language around non-consensual sexual activity. So before, in the earlier version of the guidelines, it seemed like really like Bluesky was particular on like not posting, excessive violence, gore, torture, dismemberment, or non-consensual sexual activity. But it really seemed to be at the time that posting this material was about like IRL content, right? Like, don't post people being sexually assaulted, right? The updates to the community guidelines both have this line about create, share, promote sexual content involving realistic risk of death or serious injury, which in my opinion is already a little bit of a sussy change to the guidelines, because it's very vague, right? Like, what's one person's idea of realistic sexual content involving realistic risk of death or serious injury? Like, one person's perception of that might be different from another person's perception of that, because of the simple fact that, everyone is sort of like everyone is kind of like has a different impression, a different idea of like something that is crossing into the realm of depictions of sexual content with risk of death or serious injury. An inexperienced individual might look at a shibari rope session that looks dangerous to the untrained eye and assume it's more dangerous or more potentially causing, an encouragement of a risky sexual activity than a trained and aware, shibari practitioner. Do you kind of see what I'm saying? The same thing as well if say what we call mindfuck content, content that's kind of made to encourage fear or some sort of anxiety in the sub makes its way onto Bluesky. My concern as well is, potentially maybe this line could give Bluesky the ability to censor or moderate that kind of kink content a little bit more than it did before. Now, we will talk about whether these rule changes are actually just reinforcing pre-existing enforcement guidelines or not, so we'll talk about that momentarily. But it's just something that sticks out to me of this right away. Now, the thing that obviously scares me more about these guidelines and the thing we need to talk about is we do not allow sexual content involving non-consensual sexual activity, including synthetic, simulated, illustrated, or animated versions. Now this, we're going to talk about whether this is actually a escalation or not. My personal opinion, the opinion of Bluesky users, contrasting feelings on this. My personal opinion is this. Before we get into anything Bluesky has said, there is a reason these community guidelines go out of their way to include the terms synthetic, simulated, illustrated, animated. There is a reason Bluesky has done that. And if Bluesky felt that business was going perfectly fine with how it moderated what it can consider depictions of non-consensual sexual activity, they would not have included specific mentions of illustrated or animated content. Something about Bluesky insisting that it has to say if you do animated non-con or illustrated non-con, that is a problem. Something about that specific introduction into the rules, it begs the question for me, why? Why does that need to be added? Why does Bluesky believe that it needs to clarify, if you our understanding of, depictions of non-consensual activity include illustration animated versions? We're going to see some sort of suggestion that Bluesky is not trying necessarily to ramp up its enforcement, but if that was the case, why further clarify things? I often find in the tech industry, when terms of service changes happen and more language is added to a terms of service, more language is not filler. It's added for a reason. It's added to empower a platform to say, if it gets into an issue, if a user or if it's trying to direct its moderation team how to approach moderating content, it's to empower that moderation team. It's to give them more control over content in the platform by being more specific about what is not okay. So anytime that, this is my personal feeling, anytime that a platform feels the urge to specify what kind of content breaks its rules, it does mean de facto something is happening in order to reinforce the enforcement of its pre-existing guidelines. And additionally, it's a established strategy in the tech world that claiming that one is, clarifying existing guidelines by implementing an update to terms of service. It's often done to be a little gaslighting, a little manipulative, a little bit playing with the truth, because oftentimes if a major tech company is able to argue that its terms of service is being updated to clarify things that were already existing policy, it can slip in specific things that actually are escalations of policy. Or maybe they were just implementing, that policy and didn't publicly communicate it like a couple days ago before the implementation of the terms of service. More literally, it's usually like maybe a couple weeks ago or a month or two ago. So it's just to say as well in Bluesky, we were going to see some people from Bluesky basically say, yeah, this was already our enforcement policy. And I want you guys to be wearing your tinfoil hats a little bit and be a little skeptical, because the next question that I have is, okay, well, when did enforcement of this policy actually start? Was this an in-between thing? Was it, you feel that you have to update your community guidelines, so between the last community guideline update and this one, was this a silent policy that started to get increased? Or are you just actually going to increase the enforcement of a specific guideline and act as if you're enforcing that guideline at the same level that you were prior by slowly turning up the heat? Does that make sense to you guys? Like, this is a tactic that tech companies sometimes use in order to deplatform, ultimately, sex workers, queer people, adult content creators. So let me catch up with chat. Hey, Pat. Good to have you. Is Anna eating her followers' sexual death? Isn't mindfuck kind of like hypnosis? I mean, like, not really. Mindfuck is more about, like, a fear state, or, like, kind of, like, pushing someone. It's got some edge play elements. It really depends. We're the frog again, and we're boiling in a pot, and there's a beautiful giant woman watching over us, ready to eat us. That's kind of what's going on. So the most charitable read is they had discussions with some big players, and they were like, hey, you don't enforce this. And they were like, we do already, and that triggered the update. No. You've got the timeline a bit wrong. So we're going to talk about that. You need to do payout of prediction. I vote I can't do. Oh! I completely forgot. Thank you for reminding me. Oh, wise one. Yeah, so I'll be going through the timeline. I've got the timeline established for us to discuss. So I'm gonna do a play-by-play, timeline to timeline to timeline, time after time. Okay, Dragon Anna won. Damn, like it won, but I meant like also like it was like majority rules. Like you guys figured I was gonna be a dragon today. That's sick. That's based and epic, and makes me feel kind of like you guys. I feel like you and I are like on the same wavelength. Okay, so after this drops, we get this TechCrunch article. Bluesky says it's getting more aggressive about moderation and enforcement. This is from September 22nd. This is from TechCrunch. It sounds like Bluesky is getting serious about giving some users the boot, with the company saying it will be doing more to, quote, enforce our moderation policies to better cultivate a space for healthy conversations. This is part of a broader update to the social media company's community guidelines after Bluesky asked users in August to provide feedback on an earlier draft of these changes. In a new blog post, let me actually get that up. No, it was the 19th. It was the 19th. So we've been discussing this for about 9 days now. The company said it received comments from more than 14,000 community members and that it, quote, especially heard from community members who shared concerns about how the guidelines could impact creative expression and traditionally marginalized voices. After considering this feedback, and in a return to our experimental roots, that's crazy, we are going to bring a greater focus to encouraging constructive dialogue and enforcing our rules against harassment and toxic content, the company said. For starters, we are going to increase our enforcement efforts. As part of that enforcement, Bluesky said that it will, quote, more quickly escalate enforcement actions towards account restrictions. When asked for more details, a Bluesky spokesperson told TechCrunch that moving forward, users who violate the guidelines will be getting fewer warnings before their accounts are deactivated. In addition, the company will be, quote, making product changes that clarify when content is likely to violate our community guidelines. So perhaps users will also see more warnings before they post content that might run afoul of the guidelines. Who gets banned and why remains a fraught issue for Bluesky, as it is for most social networks. For example, there have been recurring complaints that accounts fundraising for Palestinians in Gaza have been unfairly suspended. More recently, many users criticized Bluesky's decision to temporarily suspend the horror writer Gretchen Felker Martin due to her now deleted comments about the shooting of Charlie Kirk. Writer Roxanne Gay described Bluesky's decision, along with DC Comics' cancellation of Felker Martin's Red Hood comic book, as, quote, unacceptable, ridiculous, and in, quote, absolute shame. Felker Martin responded succinctly to Bluesky's post announcing the new guidelines, writing, thanks. This sucks. In addition to criticism from its more left-leaning users, Bluesky also faces ongoing complaints that has become a liberal echo chamber. Let's see. We're going to go down to here for a bit. Since these changes were announced on Friday, much of the response on Bluesky has focused on guidelines that forbid, quote, sexual content involving non-consensual activity, even if the content is animated, illustrated, or synthetic. Gaming marketplaces, including Steam and itch.io, recently faced backlash after seeming to crack down on games with edgy or even illegal adult content. One user, for example, complained that Bluesky should, quote, worry less about whether or not a cartoon has rights and more about whether real-life trans and Palestinian people do. That's pretty good. Who said that? That's pretty good. It's a pretty good take. Kendra. I don't know who that is. But they've been at the Nibs, so they're probably pretty cool. Another said this language has, quote, literally always been there because it's boilerplate social media stuff.
We have heard your concerns, and we do not give a shit, Lamau.
That's so true. That's so true. Yeah, semi-realistic risk of death and injury, quote unquote. Yeah, right. And suggested that users were confused because of, quote, Bluesky's dog shit comms. The Bluesky spokesperson said, quote, there's been some misunderstanding here. We haven't changed anything about our enforcement in this area and have no intention of doing so. I want to take a step back a little bit because, as we mentioned earlier, there was this kind of idea of this update being about enforcing our moderation policy. So let's actually look at the blog post. Whoops, I'm sorry. Let's see. Let's see. In the meantime, this is right after the paragraph about community guidelines. Okay. We're going to adjust how we enforce our moderation policies to better cultivate a space for healthy conversation. Posts that degrade the quality of conversations and violate our guidelines are a small percentage of the network, but they draw a lot of attention and negatively impact the community. Going forward, we will more quickly escalate enforcement actions towards account restrictions. We will also be making product changes that clarify when content is likely to violate our community guidelines. I do think it's really interesting because we are going to we have also here talking about the community guidelines. We're going to bring a greater focus to encouraging constructive dialogue and enforcing our rules against harassment and toxic content. For starters, we're going to increase our enforcement efforts. This right along discussion of the community guidelines where all of this shit is coming from, right? And I think it's interesting because we are getting, I'm about to discuss this, we are getting this sort of language from, I'm going to turn this down a little bit. We're getting this sort of language from Bluesky staff that are saying, no, enforcement's not changing on this. There's the same policies that we've already done on non-con content. Enforcement's not changing on this. Enforcement is not changing on this. But the whole entire point of this update is literally to bring, quote, a greater focus to encouraging constructive dialogue and enforcing our rules against harassment and toxic content, up to and including from the start increasing our enforcement efforts. So I find it really weird, guys, right? That like Bluesky is sitting there and saying like, okay, we're making it more clear now what is and isn't non-con content to us. That's like depictions that can't be on the site. We're being more clear that this is like animated content, illustrated content. It's like artwork on the site basically. But and our whole entire point of this community guidelines update is to increase enforcement. But trust me, guys, not on this one particular issue that we had further clarification on in our guidelines. No, we're not changing anything there, though. Don't worry, guys. That one's actually the same as it's always been. It's just everything else in the fucking community guidelines is changing. Like that, it doesn't make sense. It's not logical. It's not logical. Like it only makes sense in the sense that like it's easy to lie about it. Like it's easy to pretend because enforcement hasn't started of these guidelines yet. So Bluesky can, technically speaking, Bluesky can run around saying like, yeah, no, it's what we've always been doing. Now I am interested in stress testing if it's really what Bluesky has always been doing. I'm going to talk about that towards the end of this segment. But I do find this crazy, like reading through this and Bluesky's messaging from its team members has been like, this is what we've always been doing. And it's like, well, the whole point of this guidelines update is to do stuff that you haven't always been doing. So like, what is it? Like, what is it? It's crazy. 1 second. So I'm a little sus already. Like, I'm a little sus of this already. It's a little crazy to me. Sometimes you've got that dragon air about you. That's actually so true. So helping the users by being more strict. That's an interesting one. I feel like Bluesky is heading towards a Tumblr situation. Not gonna lie. Hi, Zax. I'm feeling it too. I'll talk more about it later. Here's what's changed, but also nothing is changing. Yeah, right, Fenelor? Good to have you. It doesn't make sense. It definitely reads like gaslighting. If I could get one wish granted, it would be for Bluesky and Itch to massively improve their comms / actually do PR. Yeah. They're pushing the permission structure of their moderation for no reason at all. Anna's a little sussy baka. What did you mean by that, Homer? So, there's a lot of lively conversation that's happening. This, by the way, what I'm going over is basically the timeline of events at this point. So, there's this conversation that emerged Tuesday, September 23rd on Reddit. And Haley OK on Reddit over here. No, she is part of the moderation team. Not moderation team. I'm so sorry. I was literally telling myself, like, do not say that. That's untrue. She is an engineer at Bluesky. Engineer. And so she chimed in over here to say, hi, Bluesky person here. Hi, Bluesky person. There has been no change in policy here, and we have no intention of enforcing any policy outside of what we have been enforcing to date. There seems to have been confusion because of the updated language, but this policy is the same as what existed previously. So that's the wording that she said. Then, this is when it starts to get goofy. Bluesky is like, you know what we should do, guys? This is on the 26th. This is on the 26th. This is 3 days later. Bluesky's like, you know what we should do, guys? We should reach out to individual posters and just have conversations with them. And they can start, like, straight up leaking, like, shit to the community. Like, let's just, like, start straight up leaking shit to the community through these posters that we have one-on-one calls with. And so one of the people they have a one-on-one call with is the Nerd Skull. And I don't know why. I mean, like, he's a recognized poster. I don't know why. They're like, yo, get Nerd Skull in the room, folks. I gotta turn off that announcement, by the way. They're like, yo, get Nerd Skull in the room. He's gonna fix it for us, our clutch. I don't understand why they did this. I really don't understand why they did this. I really don't understand why they did this at all. I think this is really silly what they're doing, but we'll keep talking about it. What is... He's a what poster? He's just a poster. He's just a guy. He's just a poster. We're getting the celebrity posters to do PR. It's great. Like, what you need to understand is, like, Nerd Skull, he's like a woke guy. He's like a woke poster. Got his start during, like, the Gamergate kind of years, being, like, you know, kind of, like, woke during that time period too. People have feelings about Nerd Skull, okay? Like, I've definitely seen people say, like, you know, Nerd Skull sucks and stuff like that. Well, I don't really have an opinion on Nerd Skull, actually. I've had positive, like, experiences with him. I've disagreed with him on some things sometimes. Honestly, for me, it's like, you know, it's like, whatever, like, he's a poster, you know, he posts, and this is not to knock him at all, like, this is not to knock him at all, like, it's, you know, I'm not trying to say, like, you don't deserve to, like, have calls with Bluesky or whatever. I'm just saying that this is really fucking weird. Like, imagine if, like, I don't know, imagine if, like MetLife Stadium where the Giants play was changing their policies on, like, whether you can bring, like whether they're selling alcohol at MetLife. And so they decided, like, you know what we should do? Like, we should bring in, like, a top, not even a top, like, just, like, a somewhat recognized YouTube influencer in the sports world. And we should, like, take a call with him. And he can therefore, like, communicate his personal feelings about this change to the alcohol selling policy at MetLife. Like, it doesn't make sense. It's just very bizarre. It's very bizarre. It's very weird. I don't know who is. Like, if they talk to Katie Tight Pussy. Yeah, it's exactly like that. Like, it doesn't make a lick of sense. Like, this is what talking to the press is for. And, like, I'm obviously a little salty because they didn't, like, reach out to me. And, like, this is my whole thing. Like, talking about censorship. But also, like, I am critical of every platform I ever use. So maybe that's why they didn't reach out to me. I don't know. But also, like, it's just weird. Like, you're hitting up posters and you're like, let's take calls. Posters, let's take calls. But yeah, the thing that I'm getting here, so with Nerd Skull is, well, let's read through his thread. So I had a call from someone at Bluesky, and obviously we still want to keep our eyes peeled for problems, but I came out of it pretty reassured that it's not Bluesky's intent to go after furry art and queer expression. Specifically, they told me that the primary intent of the language people felt were intended to go after furries was to be able to take down AI deepfake content intended to look like quote unquote the real thing quickly. The Bluesky report I spoke to was actually pretty knowledgeable. I think he meant like the Bluesky like staff or something, or reporter or something. I spoke to is actually pretty knowledgeable about these topics and seemed to understand that even furries who post more extreme vor/macro content hate and try to separate themselves from actual zoo sadists, and they didn't want to clamp down on good faith furry expression. Obviously, your line of interpretation may be different than mine, but that was what I got out of the conversation. I recommended that the Bluesky rep speak to some artists who are actually leading the charge to fight against censorship concerns and convince them as well, because I'm not an NSFW artist who might be affected. What I'm saying here will mean even more coming from an artist at the center of this. I was also told that internally there is no intent to change content moderation policies, that this was just going through and rewriting the old ToS, intending for the base meaning to remain the same. They said content moderation hasn't changed. Furthermore, I was told that they had realized that perhaps making changes and looking for feedback afterwards was a mistake. With such a touchy subject, and that in the future they would consider looking for feedback first and being more transparent about the intent behind these language changes. Now, I'm not telling everyone to trust Bluesky implicitly here. Keep watch for trouble and make them hold to this. I will be making a lot of noise if I ever feel like I was lied to about this personally. I just feel like the fact that they're reaching out at all is a good sign and a good first step. I find it rather unlikely that a rep has been reaching out to affected people and getting their perspectives and trying to explain that this is a misunderstanding if the plan is just to ignore concerns and start banning furry kink art later. I feel that the direction and conversation went is hopeful rather than doom and gloom. I'm willing to adopt a wait and see attitude, since my understanding is that this is all. They haven't done anything yet, but everyone is scared by the wording changes justifiably. People are being extremely normal about this, up to including directly accusing me of lying about talking to Bluesky. Okay, this is what I'm also talking about Bluesky is like kind of like Bluesky is just like blue Twitter. Like it's just really bad in that way. Like this is I've definitely seen people say insane stuff like someone got planted by the Trump administration, the Bluesky team, and I'm just like, I can't, dude. Like that's so unrealistic. Thank you for the follow, Carrington. It's just crazy. Okay, so I was told Bluesky is not currently and doesn't want to be put in a position where payment processors can dictate content policy on their platform. Rather specifically, same with advertisers. That's really it from Nerd Skull. And this is kind of where we were until today. Basically, we get this reassurance that, hey, you know, the vibes are like, we are not going to change anything that we already were. We're basing stuff on what we've already been enforcing. And that's what we hear from Reddit, from an engineer at Bluesky, and then we also hear this from Nerd Skull being, after talking to someone on the Bluesky team. Now, I'm not at liberty to discuss other people who have been meeting with Bluesky. I'm aware of a couple other folks that have been reached out to. Give me 1 second, because I'm actually checking to see. I think their meetings just concluded. So I'm waiting to see if they're going to like talk about it publicly at all, or they're waiting or things like that. But I'm informed of the fact that like meetings around this happened today.
Hey guys, this isn't a #AD, but Bluesky reached out to me and gave me an exclusive interview. This isn't an ad and I will also be sure to keep them accountable. Also remember, use code NERDSKULL to get 10% off Bluesky subs.
Personally, the concern is deepfakes and Gen AI. Why not specifically that instead of the broad terminology? Well, that's the thing. It's like things are not adding up. And then, so this is going to lead us to the next part. So this happened earlier today. So, we get this shared from Walking Mirage. This was deleted. So y.bsky.team. Y is technical advisor for Bluesky. Basically what he does in his own words is he does help with like implementing some aspects of like enforcement of moderation. So it's important to remember that while he's not the guy that makes policies, he is, you know, he's kind of like the beat cop in some ways. He's the guy that creates the stuff that makes sure moderation is enforced. So what's a very long way of saying that I need to get my paper towel that fell on the floor. That's like my little coaster from my Gatorade, so it doesn't sweat on my desk. That's a very long way of saying like this is someone who I think people are quick to kind of say like he doesn't know anything, but you know he's clued into something about moderation enforcement because it's his fucking job too, you know. So Why gets into this conversation with Zippy VTuber. I don't have all of the conversation with me. I'll just start reading off. Correction, I am not a mod, and to be more specific, it is non-consensual kink porn that's not allowed on our app. Not all kink porn. And good news, if you run your own app, you can post whatever you want. It won't be visible to users of our app if it's against the rules, but other stuff will. So already we get a dismissive tone. He's basically like, yeah, like if you don't like the fact that we are not going to have certain kinds of content, then fuck you. You just can go do your own app. You can go spin off your own little, like, PDS, your own server for app protocol. Which is kind of crazy to say because where Bluesky, more specifically, Bsky app, Bsky Social is right now, is kind of like if Mastodon Social never gave birth to a ton of federated instances that were seriously in their own right, kind of like giving birth to what became the proper modern Fediverse, right? Like Bluesky Social is just like this big behemoth of a Twitter alternative, and Bluesky's kind of team is in this really difficult crossroads where I think, Bsky.app became something that it wasn't fully prepared to become, which was trying to be a Twitter alternative. And so, like a proper Twitter alternative, like getting refugees from Twitter. I don't think they ever planned for that, even though it was clear as day that would happen. This happened before with Mastodon. It's technically happened before Pleroma, right? So anyway, Zippy VTuber keeps chatting with Y and says, by non-consensual, you mean like deepfakes and the like? Yeah, not fiction? No. And I gotta go through the community guidelines again. It's crazy. He's like, no, not deepfakes. Like depictions of non-consensual sex acts, even if fictional. The thing most people appear to be getting extra mad over is that we don't allow depictions of rape now. This to me is a big sticking word in this whole entire conversation. Because it would have been one thing if he said the thing most people appear to be getting extra mad over is that we don't allow depictions of rape, and we haven't. That would fall in line with what we saw from Haley, who basically said, hey, this doesn't really change anything in our enforcement. But I think it's a little bit of a Freudian slip here, where he says the thing most people appear to be getting extra mad over is that we don't allow depictions of rape now. And that, to me, gave me and a lot of other people pause, because it did seem to confirm that Bluesky is moving away from allowing a certain kind of content that it didn't earlier. Now, before anyone yells at me, gets upset at me, cancels me, let's talk about this a little bit. Because what we do see is a little bit of a walking back from why people are mad that the wording is changing to now clearly say that non-consensual kink porn is not allowed, despite us already actioning that content previously when it came up. And then we also have him saying Haley, the engineer that we talked about earlier, is correct that we aren't changing how we action here. We have already been actioning per this policy. The main thing is just clarifying the language to match what we have been doing. And yes, deepfakes are a big part of it, but that's also not what I've seen people be worried about. So we get some clarification with the deepfake thing. Yay. But we do have him sort of saying, like, actually, no, this is what we've already been doing. We've already been enforcing this. You know, like, oh, no, actually, we've been enforcing this. Now this obviously though sets a lot of people off because first of all, hi kill. This obviously sets a lot of people off because first, again, the big sticking question here is this use of the word now. And was this his way of, in short form, basically saying we've clarified our rules? Because I wouldn't necessarily say if I was someone who worked in some capacity with enforcement of policy on Bluesky, even if I'm not the one that is creating the policy, if my mindset was we allowed depictions of rape before and now they're allowed on the site, I might be more, we allowed depictions of rape in some capacity in kink porn, as he describes himself, kink porn, in the past, and now we are changing that policy. My mindset as someone who works on some aspect of content enforcement might be that I might let slip a perspective of like before versus now, before versus after. We don't allow depictions of rape now. I think a little bit, my theory is this was high-key kind of a Freudian slip, that something is changing internally. And look, we just talked about it. The whole entire point of that blog post with the changes to community guidelines is not just that blog post, the one that originally came out, right before like the 22nd. The whole point of that blog post wasn't like, oh, hey, like there's been some confusion, but nothing's changing. We're just updating the guidelines, make things clear. The whole point of this post was to say like we are amping up moderation, right? So it would make perfect sense if this guy over here has the mindset of, by the way, we're also amping up moderation on the issue of non-consensual content. I do think that might be the case. I do think that might be the case. Hey, Ravenon. That is kind of my feeling. I'm catching up on something on Discord really quickly. So, yeah, I'm just checking in on something I probably can't share quite yet. Okay, so, the thing I just think is interesting as well, that we do get this kind of dismissive attitude from this guy who, is like helping Bluesky, work on their enforcement moderation in some form, where he seems to be basically like, basically Bluesky users are like completely like kind of like prone to like being hysterical babies. When like someone who's contributed code is talking about it, he's very quick to also hop in and chat about it. And then like, when someone comes in and says, I'm not asking you to consider if you care about free speech or that you have to care about rape pornography. I'm talking to you as a tech professional, product and UX. There are other ways to go about this. Then he plays the kind of like, I hear you and I appreciate the comments. And I do want to clarify, I don't contribute at all to policy. I mostly spend some time on enforcement when something can be automated. The best thing I can do, is elaborate on my understanding of our policies and try to correct misunderstandings of them that I see. And then you compare that to the way he's talking to like someone who's more like a colleague, and he's like, yeah, people respond crazy on the internet is basically what he's saying. So I don't really trust Bluesky's intentions. Okay, like, again, I'm going back to the post over here. I'm going back in time. We go back here and we see this idea of You know, their whole entire focus is, you know, a better structure, more specific language, protected expression, which, you know, I can debate, and this emphasis on increasing enforcement efforts. Like, this does seem to be a key aspect of the community guidelines. Now, we are seeing members of the Bluesky team, again, continue to stress, like they told Nerd Skull, like they've mentioned to, like Haley mentioned on Reddit, that they aren't necessarily trying to change enforcement, but I feel like there is this mixed messaging because there is this emphasis on their blog post that they are trying actively to change elements of how things are enforced. And my fear is, and what I think is actually this. I think we are going to continue to see Bluesky try to reach out to different people and try to reach out to different creators and artists and things like that, different posters. And I think what Bluesky wants to do is look like they are eager for conversation and diplomacy and, you know, have a dialogue around the rules so that they can change the rules, so that they can improve the rules. But I think ultimately Bluesky, I think they're kind of locked into a pathway of more and more NSFW censorship. I mean, every social media site is. Like, it's just inevitable. At some point, social media sites have to start censoring more and more. That's just how it works. Every social media site inevitably engages in it. And so I am not trusting of Bluesky's intentions because I don't trust anybody in this field when they run a social media platform, because everyone ends up feeling some pressure somewhere along the line or tries to take preemptive steps to protect itself. And let's not forget, Bluesky has taken preemptive steps to protect itself. We just ran the TechCrunch article a few minutes ago about, for example, you know, the censorship of Gretchen Felker Martin and the censorship of Nathan Grayson as well, because he wrote about Charlie Kirk. And they didn't like, you know, rest in piss being mentioned in the article or whatever they wrote for Aftermath. So we are also, again, seeing policies of further enforcement across Bluesky. So why would that not affect adult content on Bluesky? I'm also just, again, suspicious of this idea that, like, nothing is really changing significantly for enforcement on Bluesky when we've already seen, I'm skeptical of this idea because it's very easy for Bluesky to come up to individuals and take these calls of posters or whatever, you know, tell people like Nerd Skull, like, we don't want to censor, we promise, we don't want to censor, we promise. But then quietly, a censorship happens here, a censorship happens there, a censorship happens here, a censorship happens there. And it becomes this kind of divide and conquer element where, you know, Bluesky can kind of create this idea in people's minds that, like, oh, this artist that we censored for non-con material, you know, wasn't actually the non-con that upset us. Like, oh, it was like some other element. Like maybe there was like, you know, intox kink in there or something like that. And that's actually the line for us. We just got put in the rules, but it was actually the intoxication that was the line for us. Oh, you know, it was just like the specific way that like she struggled too much. But like if you want to do like your dubcon stuff, like that's fine. But this was just one occurrence. You know what I'm saying? Like they will start to divide and conquer by making it look as if the introduction of the rule and the emphasis of the rule is actually being very surgical and precise, even though it builds up a manufactured consent to censor more and censor more and censor more and censor more until they no longer have to do the things where they're like, oh, this character just looked a little too young. Oh, you know, it's a little too furry. You know, oh, it's just a little too intox kinky. Like eventually, next thing you know, they're just saying like, yeah, like non-con's not really flying with us. And I think that's sort of how I feel things are going. I don't trust Bluesky in this instance at all. I do not trust their intentions. I do think what they're trying to do ultimately, and I know some folks don't want to hear me say this, but I think ultimately what they're trying to do is do this kind of like poster outreach campaign in order to try to get people to think that the situation is safer than it really is, when actually, simply put, we have a change to community guidelines that are more enforcing, that are trying to enforce more. And we are not getting direct communication from Bluesky through official channels beyond Bluesky basically saying in TechCrunch hey, you know, people are kind of like, you know, what was the way that TechCrunch put it? There's been some misunderstanding here. We haven't changed anything about our enforcement in this area and have no intention of doing so, when, you know, the theme of this update is changing the enforcement of specific things to strengthen and emboldening enforcement. So I just don't fully trust Bluesky. I think it's important to understand that a certain level of sort of like trying to get people on board, so a small, silent, quiet maneuver towards censorship can occur. I want to remind folks that when Patreon would engage in some similar behavior as well, right? Like Patreon would pull, like, say, like lolly show content, and then like it would invite people back on to basically get rid of the lollies, and then you're good, right? But eventually they reached a point where Patreon just had to outright state, you know, like, no age play content in so many words, right? Like that's basically what Patreon had to end up saying. But it started originally with this kind of quiet policy at Patreon where they were like permissive of lolly show as long as they didn't see it, but if they saw it and it was still too obvious, then they ban you, and then you could come back. And then it started to be a little bit different, and this kind of happened, you know, this kind of stuff happened with like hypnosis content as well, right? Where to the, like, in the sense that like hypnosis content, you know, originally hypnosis content bans were about sexual violence completely, and they still are, but as the sexual violence in the sense that like if hypnosis is considered non-consensual. But after the first wave of hypnosis bans that were happening in June, there were still these kind of ripple effect bans that also would happen where other hypnosis creators would be impacted and wouldn't be based on Patreon content, be based on content outside of Patreon as well. At least that's what happened with one gay hypnosis creator. So I do want to remind folks that like a censor sometimes comes with a velvet glove, and just to be careful. Now, as for me personally, this is going to influence my relationship with Bluesky a little bit. I want to catch up with chat, and then I'll talk about what I mean by that. Anna has an addiction. This is not about my addiction. This is about your addiction. I feel like they're trying to actually it because they're technically not changing the rules, but they're changing how they enforce the rules. This was de facto allowed, and now it's de facto banned, but they're arguing that since nothing has changed de jure, it's not really a change, which is just wordplay bullshit. That's, I think in so many words, that's how I feel, FT Echo. And I'm nervous that like what's going to happen is like even internally within Bluesky, there's not a full understanding of what's actually going to come. Like it doesn't take much for a moderation team to just turn the knob on non-con content. You know, Bluesky can contact artists and posters and things like that and say like, yeah, you know, just giving you a heads up. Like, we're not actually going to ban like the non-con content, but it doesn't take much for moderators or an AI to start banning that content. It really doesn't. I just hate that clarified language is still not the same as providing answers. It's the same kind of stuff people hate about algorithm-driven sites because no one in charge will give details about specifics so people can properly respond and provide feedback. I think, honestly, Bluesky would solve this issue today, right now, if they said, here is our policy plan. First, we are going to change the community guidelines, take out the illustrated and animated wording, and emphasize specifically what kind of content is upsetting to us. We are going to actively change that. We are going to change that now because there is a lack of clarity. Second, we are going to specifically outline what kinds of sexual content are allowed on the site and what kinds of sexual content are not allowed on the site. Third, we want to make sure that there is a proper appeals and support process with further ongoing dialogue, inviting in NSFW artists to help ahead of time look through our rules and give ultimately guidance on what we should do. Bluesky is never going to do that. At most, it's nice that Bluesky is reaching out to like, you know, creators, artists, NSFW folks, stuff like that, and having these conversations, but they are never going to actually invite those folks in the room to help them create the rules. And that, to me, is the real indicator that things are not going to change significantly and that we're heading in a dangerous direction. Because at the end of the day, Bluesky is not sitting there and saying, hey, we understand these rules suck, we're going to change the rules. They're sitting there and saying, hey, we understand you're bothered by our rules. We're going to pinky promise with you that it's not going to be as bad as you think. Trust us. It's not going to be as bad as you think. Pinky promise. Pinky promise. And that's very different. That's a very different strategy. That's a very different strategy. It is one that does not inspire trust, especially if they're not going through official channels and they're contacting people that use the site. Like, what's going on with that? Dismissive has been a pretty good descriptor of Blue Sky's team since ever. I don't think the Blue Sky team particularly likes its users. I think the Blue Sky team finds its users very annoying and cringy is actually the read I get. And I don't really know what Blue Sky thought it was going to get. Like, it petitioned itself as the alternative to Twitter. Like, tech bros are not leaving Twitter, but like women of pronouns and blue hair are. Like, of course you're going to get this type of crowd. I don't know why they're... Okay. If I'm a VTuber and I become a chuddy VTuber, right? And I start, like, you know, dropping all these kind of like chud jokes and stuff like that. And my audience becomes chuddy. And then I get mad that my audience is chuddy. It's not my... Like, it's on me. It's my fault. I was the one that was signaling I was chuddy, you know? Like, I was the one that was saying the chuddy jokes and making the chuddy comments and things like that. Like, it's on me if my community becomes chuddy and the chuds show up and I get upset that the chuds showed up when I was chud signaling. I was... What's the opposite of virtual signaling? It's like vice signaling, sin signaling, cringe signaling, whatever. Like, if I do that, it's on me. I can't sit there and be like, oh my god, I hate the community that I actively advertise to. It's like, I don't know. you made the sandwich. Like, you literally made the sandwich. And that's how I feel about Blue Sky too. Like, I have no patience for Blue Sky moderators and team members or whoever that are like, oh my god, Blue Sky is so, oh my god, everyone acts crazy on Blue Sky. It's like, you position yourself as an alternative to Twitter while having specifically a lot of Twitter-oriented features and themes. And while there is a nature of preventing some toxicity on Blue Sky, it's become very obvious that you can't out-engineer the toxic elements of Twitter's structure, which Blue Sky ultimately still has. It's still a Twitter clone. So you can't sit here and say, like, oh my god, guys, like, the product that I actively built, like, the crazy hell machine that I created is putting out some real hell today. I don't know what to tell you. You created the thing. And you made it this way. And you work on the thing. Like, you can't sit here and be like, oh my god, people are crazy. It's like, you make them crazy. You run the crazy place. You are literally, like, running the asylum. You know? It's like, you can't sit there and say, like, I can't believe the place I actively run is so crazy. It's like, then run it differently, bro. I don't know what to tell you. So I don't really have a lot of patience either for that. Like, I get that Blue Sky is like a team. It's not just one or two people, but like, come on. Like, I think at some point, like, everyone on Blue Sky has to accept that, like, they were looking for a user base and they got a user base. And if they didn't want this kind of user base, then they should have thought very specifically about what they were getting themselves into. Because the Blue Sky team seems very frustrated with the user base it's gotten. It feels a lot like what they want is like Twitter circa like 2015, and what they have is like Twitter circa 2020. But they advertise themselves to Twitter circa 2020. So I don't know what. They have no right to complain. Like, they got what they wanted. If they're amping up moderation, that in itself is a change in moderation. So things aren't staying exactly the same as some are claiming. Yes, and like, to be clear, you know, what they're saying is, you know, in sort of like, you know, in like Haley's case, like, they're trying to say, like, specifically that the, you know, like these mentions are about, like, well, let me go to the TechCrunch as a better example here. I think what the folks from the Blue Sky team are trying to say when they say, like, we aren't changing enforcement, like, they do mean, like, in this specific area, they're trying to basically say, like, well, we're having our cake and eating it too. And what I'm calling bullshit on is the fact that it doesn't really seem to me like you can have your cake and eat it too. I actually don't think they're trying to have their cake and eat it too. I think they just want the cake. Like, I think they actually just do want to increase enforcement on this issue because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to, like, not enforce here when you specifically go out of your way for targeted policy change. And if there's a specific content that's not non-con that they're trying to target, then just say it. Just say lolly show, or just say like, like bestiality content, furry content, intox content, whatever. Like, just to at least be transparent. I'm not saying like we should settle for like losing intox kink or something. I'm just saying like they should be open. We don't want to get caught censoring. Yeah. Nerd Skull's definitely gonna keep him accountable. It's so funny. Great way to not leave a paper trail we don't actually want to censor. Just call people and have them say that. And then you can call them wrong later. Yeah, exactly. I know one of the calls that happened, Bluesky denied. They rejected having the call recorded. So that should also make you suspicious too. Heck, wasn't even the first time they snap banned Gretchen or swabs of trans women, particularly in the last 2 months. Yeah, Gretchen said something about J.K. Rowling, and that was the first kind of ban. And that was, I think, shortly after the original August updates. They're building up to the algorithmic response type where they never clarify specifics. They'll just generalize the reason and move on after enforcing, just like most social media. Yeah, I think people don't realize that. Like, it's the same problem that happens with itch.io, where people think of itch.io as like this twee small thing and not like implementing at times tech-based PR strategies, which is like, while they're moving fast and breaking things, like, well, maybe itch.io not specifically. Let me put it this way. Tech has a mindset in the US of moving fast, breaking things, and that also happens a lot of PR, moving fast, trying to make people confused about what's actually going on internally, prevent crisis or manage crisis by not being super clear on things, because then people argue with each other, they get confused, they fight with each other about details, contrasting information, kind of like try to confuse and dizzy people, make it not really transparent and clear what's going on. That's why it's really important for people to come in and demand transparency, because it's sort of like the equivalent of like two big hands coming in and like holding the company still, because if that happens, they can't move fast, they can't break people's perception of the situation. It forces accountability, it forces them to communicate directly. I think one of the reasons why Bluesky didn't want to meet with me is because they understood that might happen, and it might lead to some embarrassing things coming out about what their actual plans are with this content moderation. I think they find it safer to talk to posters, artists, things like that, not so much the press, because the official line they're going to take with the press is there is no real change in content moderation on this issue. I worry that there's just an inherent tension here where any social media that runs a moderation team that can scale at all is going to end up drawn towards this sort of thing. It just does. I mean, the end result of this is actually just what a lot of the people on Bluesky are saying towards people that are yelling, like part of the people on the Bluesky team. The end result of all this is literally just someone's going to create PDS and there's going to be a fracture. But it's all going to be federated still, but it's going to weaken the voices of anyone that's left-wing that went to Bluesky, because we're not all going to be hanging on one big communal site. We're going to be separated from each other. Some accounts are going to be banned. Some activist types are going to be banned from being accessed on Bluesky Social. I think a lot of people don't understand, like, this is actually what's happening on Bluesky and, like, what Bluesky offers is in theory really good, but in practice is really bad for organizing and, like, a strong leftist contingent, because what's happening is eventually Bluesky is going to quasi-balkanize. Like, that's kind of what's going to happen with everything around Bluesky Social. Mostly in the sense that, or Bluesky app, more so in the sense that, like, people are going to move off of Bluesky app and go do their own PDS. And when that happens, it's going to be very difficult for some of the stronger left-wing voices, while the more liberal voices, left-of-center voices, get to have a good time on Bluesky app, on Bluesky Social. Is there any social... Oh, wait, I forget if I said that, but yeah, there's really no social media that's not beholden to capital. That's the nature of the beast. They can fix everything with a 3-paragraph response, but they won't, because they want to be vague to ensure they don't outright push away users and invite specific criticism, and so they can do this slowly and quietly. Then why run a platform if you don't care about the users? Money. Frustration. Sometimes what happens with platforms is it's also long-term planning. Like, if you don't like a kind of person on your platform, the goal becomes, in 5 years, try to shake them off. Get them off your platform. What's a really good way to do that? Well, a really good way to do that is to silently and quietly, introduce more signs that suggest it's a hostile environment to them, like, suspending or temporarily, booting off their favorite writers, artists, content creators, taking steps around adult content moderation. These are steps that start to signal that the platform is getting more hostile to certain kinds of users and soften the landing pad to deplatforming. And I think in the same way too with Bluesky. Bluesky, I don't think likes who's on Bsky social, on bsky.app. And so what Bluesky is going to do is slowly make the platform a little more hostile. Allow the Jesse Single types in, for example. Make the platform a little less accommodating. Be a little bit quicker on the trigger finger about banning and, kind of like suspending and keeping temporarily and then permanently out folks like Gretchen, who, are going to say very strongly, fuck J.K. Rowling or whatever. Or fuck Charlie Kirk. I think that's where Bluesky is going to go. They understand that there are parts of their user base that they like, parts of their user base that they don't like, so they're going to try to cleave off the parts of the user base they don't like by making it a more hostile environment. That's what I think is happening, and I think this is a really interesting case study. Because with the non-con content, I think you're going to start to see this exact policy approach happen around trans folks. I think you're going to see it around sex workers. I think you're going to see it around activists around Palestine. I think this is kind of the start of Bluesky really just ramping up into like what we want as a very left of center crowd. And a very techie crowd. And if you're not that, then fuck you. You can like go hang out on other PDS. I agree. I think that the vagueness is done on purpose because it allows them to ban the stuff that they want while keeping other things that might match the same description. If they clarify, they would have to hold to the standards equally. Good to have you, Theory Girl. FTW, I agree. I think that's a good, accurate assessment. Chungus, Anna. It can't be sin signaling. That sounds like too much fun. Sounds like too much fun to be chuddy. Bro is driving the crazy train. Hi, Doling Long. Good to have you. Hi, Cordless Potato. Is there a post that has a food summary of the situation, a good summary of the situation screenshots? I'm trying to explain to a friend that was asleep and it's hard with half of it deleted. I think this is what I would do. This is the one I would send. That's probably the best. It is a lot to figure out right after waking up. It really is. It's kind of hard to not be a doomer about the entire concept of social media not inevitably becoming authoritarian and respectable like this, unless there's something federated, open source, etc., but easy for normies to use. And like I mentioned yesterday, this is the problem, right? It's really hard to create like a federated, open source social media platform that's highly adopted and you can be a content creator there and be very popular. It's very difficult. The one reason that I've come back to Bluesky, and now, I mentioned this, I'm going to talk about it briefly, why I'm considering not staying on Bluesky. Before I talk about not staying on Bluesky, the one reason I came back to Bluesky is because it actually is still de facto a centralized social media platform. And so it's very easy to get good engagement on there in the way that Twitter doesn't fully offer anymore, because Twitter has become, in its kind of like final death gasps, as like this right-wing sort of like like 4chan but connected, like microblogging 4chan is basically what it is. Twitter in its like dying final gasps has is trying to force people to stay on the platform as long as possible and avoid engagement with things off the platform. So it's very hard to get people off Twitter. Twitter is obsessed with keeping people on it, including content creators. And so Bluesky has good engagement rates compared to Twitter for many individuals. But the sad part is Bluesky is a smaller site. You kind of have to be in the elite of Bluesky, like that top 500 like Bluesky users that are getting a lot of good engagement to actually grow on Bluesky. And I'm a Fed. You guys didn't know. To grow on Bluesky, and then like once you hit that like even once you hit like the top 400, 500 of like influential Bluesky posters or whatever, as the stats came out and showed, it doesn't mean you're gonna grow your account. Like accounts kind of, they get stuck. Like my account is stuck at 5.9k. My prior one, the one that I had originally, was stuck at about 11k. Because this has been documented, one thing that's happening on Bluesky is follows are decreasing. Well, what happens when follows decrease? It means people are getting in their bubbles. They're getting stuck with the same level of posters. They're not looking for new posters to follow. And that creates sort of like this bubble effect where everyone kind of has these communities that they're kind of primarily hanging out in. They don't cross over much. And what happens when you have that lack of crossover? Well, people get weird. There's a rump effect that happens. You know, people get more radical in their specific opinions and feelings. This is why you see more conspiratorial thinking on Bluesky as well, because the bubble is closing, and, you know, some of the more radical elements of Bluesky that are prone to conspiratorial thinking, not to be confused with just general leftist thought, like conspiratorial folks on Bluesky are starting to really make each other conspiratorial. That's how you end up with like people just like screaming at Bluesky devs in ways that are completely inappropriate, even despite all this, and like claiming that like, oh, like someone installed someone from the Trump administration in Bluesky. Like it's just crazy stuff like that. Like that's the sort of stuff that you're going to start seeing also more on Bluesky, which is why I'm calling it Blue Twitter, like Blue Twitter. That's exactly what it is. Like it's just Blue X. And it's going to get worse. So this might be pushing on the politics yell, but I suspect for American-based companies, we're rapidly spiraling towards like demands from the government that social media just basically banning trans women in general, and they'll probably comply with this. I feel like we're going to have to wait and see on that kind of stuff is really all I can say. No one really knows how this kind of censorship is going to activate and look. But yeah. I'm not optimistic about anything with Bluesky. I'm not optimistic. I see a Mecha Anna. That's a cool model. Thank you. I got to use more on stream. So I didn't mention this. Let's see earlier. So that's the media tab. Okay. So this is how I will cap things off. I mentioned this. I'm going to think carefully on whether to stay on Bluesky. Probably will make a decision October 15th. The way staff is handling this issue is kind of the final straw for me. Completely unprofessional. I definitely feel like the Bluesky staff just hates its users. I think the Bluesky staff is not doing a good job on handling this. And I honestly feel that Bluesky is becoming a toxic environment in ways that are not dissimilar. By the way, thank you for the head pads, Damonia and Pat. I appreciate that. I think that Bluesky is becoming a toxic environment that's different from, but the same coin as Twitter. And so I would rather choose between one of the two. And I will be blunt. A lot of folks in the VOR, Gynus, F4F, ASMR community, they still use Twitter. It's a very important place for a content creator to be. A lot of content creators primarily focus on Twitter. Like, think of all the content creators I hang out with. They are not big Bluesky users. Ow! What did I do? I mean, like, think of, like, you know, think of Ember, Niara, you know, Ionaro, Ari, Avi, Ava Lamp. Like, they're mostly Twitter users. Because, unfortunately for Bluesky, the creator engagement is still ultimately the exposure that you get on Twitter is very strong. At least we get people to interact with us on Twitter compared to Bluesky. I think Daemonia also explains in a lot of ways how a lot of people unfortunately feel. You know, someone like myself or like my friend Kate, who you've seen play, you know, me and her play Valorant together. We are not reflective of the average Bluesky experience. Like, this kind of shit where like I'm like I might leave Bluesky and get 11 reposts, 63 likes, 10 comments. The fact that like I get to post stuff on Bluesky and it can start the agenda for the day, like that's not normal for the average Bluesky user. And it's very hard for the average Bluesky user to do that. Like Bluesky moves like molasses. And that's like in terms of like, you know, upward mobility as a content creator. Like the popular ones get and stay popular and everyone else kind of gets stuck. And because the follow count is dropping, because it's turning more and more into atomized bubbles. And that's really dangerous for content creators to invest too much energy into. The more that content creators invest into a platform where there is a lack of long-term growth, the harder it is to grow. Bluesky is very engaging for a specific type of content, and content creation is not the peak of that written work, and some art is more in that vein. And even that is skewed since the growth is slow for creatives without a following. I think you're so correct, Kale. Because what you see a lot... By the way, it's so good to have you chatting in chat. I've missed you, Kale. what you see a lot of is academics, writers, and certain kinds of artists do well on Bluesky, but the average content creator at large is not going to have a great time on Bluesky. Anyone trying to have an actual career, even a partial one, needs to be where the most people are active, and unfortunately that's still Twitter. I know a few people in the animation community who feel similarly about wanting to leave Twitter but not being able to do so. I would definitely say, I got to show it here. Let me bring up like SimilarWeb. If it's gonna play nice with me. 1 second. I think it might, because I still have like a super base and epic premium trial account, which is great for these streams. So I'm gonna do a chat. I'm gonna bring up Twitter versus Bluesky, and I'll show you guys. I'll show you guys why it's not even close. I mean, we'll get up what was it? Okay. Yep, here it is. Okay, let me get it up. I mean, look. So this is a comparison from SimilarWeb, bsky.app versus x.com. X globally is number 5 in the world. Bluesky number 277. Country rank, X top 10 in the top 10. Bluesky in the top 150. Industry rank for technology, social media. Twitter number 3, Bluesky number 25. Total visits, X 4.413 billion, Bluesky 147. A lot of people are going to say, well, there's a lot of bots on Twitter. So let's say for a brief moment that only 25% of Twitter is human beings. Okay. 4.413 billion. What's 1/4 of that? I hate that I'm using AI for this. That's 1 billion. 1.1 billion to be precise. So even if most of Twitter is bots, it still is 10 times bigger in terms of visits for Bluesky. It's 10 times bigger than Bluesky. You can't compete with that. Bluesky cannot. That's why what's important for Bluesky has been to be an alternative to Twitter. Not a direct competitor, but simply an alternative. That's where Bluesky's been strongest. In not trying to be literally a one-to-one Twitter competitor, but offer something different. I think everyone that uses Bluesky can agree that even though Bluesky has a lot in common with Twitter, what also makes Bluesky a good website is, at its best, is the fact that it is a little different. It is not exactly a mainstream social media platform. Unfortunately, though, that comes with costs. And one of the costs is that for a lot of content creators, it's very hard to properly grow on Bluesky unless you are the kind of person that when you move to a platform, people follow you. People will come with you. That's it. You're a proper influencer. Hey, puns. It's a shame because few people will switch platforms until everyone switches platforms. Exactly. Part of why I don't want to start over on Bluesky or any new social media platform. Recovering your base is very time consuming and bad engagement makes it worse. It's true. The only reason why I got back up to 6K on Bluesky is very simply because of the censorship stuff. That was actually very good for me. Anna's showing numbers. Who's up with their numbers? Even 50% is still 2 billion. But exactly. Let's assume that 1 in 2 users on Twitter is a bot. That's still 2 billion users that are not. Platform switching is hard to pull off for anyone, especially those with even minimal followings. Twitter is going to be hard to beat because it is ingrained, even with all the idiocy going on. The numbers aren't even comparable at their base. I think people also don't realize, if you're not spending time on Twitter, you don't realize what Twitter is becoming in 2025. And, yes, it's full of right-wing grifters. When you first create a Twitter account, you get sent a ton of MAGA shit. It is definitely a place where right-wing thought is getting amplified, and it's a little bit harder to be an outspoken queer person. But Twitter is not hanging out on poll, okay? It's just not. It does have a lot of leftist folks there. a lot of leftist content creators. Like fucking Hassan is there. Taylor Lorenz is there. Like there is a lot of folks that are very major voices in leftist thought that are most active on Twitter. And so people do also have this idea of Twitter as being like the Nazi bar. And it's like, well, it's the Nazi bar that like Hassan actively is like, you know, punching out Nazis at. So maybe the Nazi bar is kind of actually more like a right-wing bar. Like it's a little different than what people realize. If you're on the app, you start to understand that the way the app operates is a little different than what people assume. It is still not a great place, you know. Puns, Kale, I didn't realize you two knew each other. I should have known. Sending you a DM of something to watch later that goes into bot number studies. Ooh. So point out, I on account for months now and just started getting new Donald Trump ads, so that shit is pushed even if you don't want to interact. It's true. It's true. Don't get me wrong. Although I will say, I don't get the Trump ads anymore. But I did buy premium, so because I wanted it for potentially streaming, uploading videos. So, in terms of me with Bluesky, I don't really know. I'm gonna wait and see.